It's ADSN on the beat, where the data meets the street. James and Daniel in your feed, breaking down the code you need. Tech talk, ad game, and a little AI. Every week we got the chat on ADSN.
We're back with another ADSN. We've got a very special guest, Brian Quinn, the North American president from AppsFlyer, joining us today. Talk all things AI, how the customer journey is changing in the AI landscape, how AppsFlyer is tackling this, what they're hearing from brands. We're covering a lot today. Brian, super excited to have you and actually have you back on ADSN. So welcome.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
We're going to jump right in. You know, AppsFlyer, you guys position yourselves as the modern marketing cloud. You're working with over 15,000 brands, right? Big ones, TikTok, King, Netflix, Pepsi, Burger King. And James and I know AppsFlyer for years. You guys have helped brands measure the steps in their customer journey. A lot of mobile app brands, and that's kind of how we worked with you at Snap and prior to that. But let's just dive right into it. You know, AI is changing everything we know about marketing, everything about how brands are engaging. And so let's talk about how you guys are seeing how AI changes that customer journey and how brands have to approach the customer journey and how they're interacting.
Yeah, I think, one of the initial questions that brands and marketing executives are asking themselves is, what part of the customer journey do they want to let the AI chatbots take, and what parts do they want to retain themselves? So I talk to a lot of CMOs and marketing leaders who are being tasked by their CEOs to say, okay, we need to show up in these chatbot answer engines, but it's more than a marketing problem. It's a big business question of, it's one thing to have visibility. It's one thing to have awareness and mentions inside these answer engines. It's another thing to understand, for my customer relationship and my customer journey, what am I willing to let the chatbot take, and what do I want to retain on myself? And I think this is really where the conversation is moving to in the industry.
And we've talked a lot about, James and I have on ADSN, where the UIs are becoming, in many cases, kind of stripped out, right? And folks are either kind of ceding to chatbots or becoming kind of API layers. And we're proponents of that in many respects. But, we've talked recently about where the UI needs to show up and where people can differentiate. And so as those marketers are having that discussion and that debate internally, how do you guys get involved on and kind of what's your point of view on, like, where does the UI need to start and stop, and where does the kind of chatbot API layer, kind of the invisible layer, need to really come in?
I think it depends a lot on the brand itself, the business itself. Some businesses want to see their apps, their sites be the destination where they want to retain their first party data. They want to give the great customer experience. They might reserve loyalty experiences or complex purchase decisions on their own properties and leverage the chatbots and the UI for awareness and distribution and traffic referrals. You see other businesses that might already be aggregators, or they might already be trying to be wherever the customer is making decisions, and they're willing to more insert their entire customer journey, or a bigger portion of it, inside these, LLM UIs, if you will. And I think it really comes down to a fundamental business question of, are you trying to protect your brand and the customer experience and drive people to these owned sites outside the answer engines and get the distribution and the referrals and the kind of top of the funnel? Or are you looking to actually embed yourselves more into the AI and allow your customers to have a fuller, maybe purchase decision or customer journey inside that? And I think, we get involved because brands are coming to us and saying, we've standardized our performance marketing customer journey measurement with you, AppsFlyer. Many of them are mobile first companies, or mobile in nature, but now it's way beyond mobile, right? We're doing web and TV and consoles and PCs and now answer engines. So many businesses have looked at AppsFlyer as their source of truth to measure the customer journey and understand attribution and understand, if I'm investing in marketing, where's the payoff? And they're coming to us and saying, where should I look at these answer engines and these chatbots in the customer journey, and how do I understand sort of downstream measurement? So we're having a lot of conversations with them along these topics.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and Daniel and I have had this conversation quite a few times, where on one hand, like the answer engines could represent sort of what the news feeds looked like, where like obviously it becomes somewhat of a storefront, but you can still maintain the first party relationship. And the apps who like actually invested in that and didn't go all in on the news feeds for distribution definitely benefited this like last cycle, right? Like we've seen a ton that just got wrecked by being so reliant on the news feeds themselves. On the other hand, you kind of could see a world where just AI is so good that it does all collapse. Do you have like a point of view yet, or is it like too early to say, is this similar to that, or this is sort of a different beast?
I think it's a good metaphor. I think along the lines of, what type of decisions as a consumer am I making? Is it more of a utility? Is it a quick decision? Am I looking for a quick answer? And maybe I care less about the brand and I care less about the emotional connection, and I'm looking to solve a transactional problem. And if so, do I lean into the answer engine with a couple of quick, mentions or recommendations, and I make a decision and it's very efficient? As opposed to, do I really, have emotional connection to what I'm doing? Is it a complex journey? Do I need a lot of input? Do I need time to think about it? Where does the brand in my mind and my psychology play in that decision? And so if I take a consumer point of view, I do see an ability for the AI to be good enough and very good in helping me to kind of outsource a lot of transactional decisions that I might not care that much about, and separate that from the brand and the story, the emotional connection that I might have with others. So that's kind of a splitting point I have as from a consumer standpoint.
And then kind of, I don't know if you're probably seeing this in a lot of your data, but like on one hand, it's sort of ironic that there's this sort of fear of maybe it collapsing into the AIs, but then you've had this explosion of apps because of vibe coding, right? You probably like never had more apps be created. There's like more apps created in the last 6 months than probably ever. Yeah. And so are you seeing that phenomenon up front? And I don't know if there's any insight from that you could share with us.
I mean, the amount of new apps in the app stores is massive. It's something like 80% year over year growth in new apps in the app stores. A lot of them are not going to find the distribution. They're not going to get they're not going to make your top 10. But we're seeing an explosion, partly due to vibe coding and product development as the constraint or the bottleneck is no longer there, right? Distribution is the bottleneck. Attention is the bottleneck. So the game has shifted into how to allocate marketing dollars most effectively to get our apps in the right consumer attention. But it's also related to the demise of open web traffic and the ability for brands to really control the app experience, right? Like we are seeing a real interest in brands cultivating the app experience again at the expense of web because they can control it. So they bring their loyalty or best engagement or complex purchase decisions or sort of best parts of their customer journey back into the app because they're fearful of they can't control the web. And the web a lot of times is now being a source of data that the LLMs are scraping to make recommendations and not a destination as they once were. So the dynamic between mobile and web is very, very quickly shifted in favor of apps in the last 12 months.
And yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. I was shopping for something retail, and I've noticed over the last 6 months in particular, I mean, you go from the web and they just push you so hard into the app, and you got to get phone number, email, everything. And I know they've always had that, but for some reason, it feels much more aggressive now to get in an app. And they're all not great experiences, but to your point, I guess it's kind of data protection and kind of protect the entire experience. And so I'm curious, like, because distribution now becomes it always has been a challenge, but now it's the sole kind of differentiator, really, and the demise of the open web. And so now you've got a concentration of where you can actually grab attention like who are the winners after this cycle? Does it accrue to just the top? Like how does a mid-level or a smaller player start to compete in that? Like, I mean, you guys have seen smaller companies rise up. I mean, King is a great example. Kind of came out of nowhere and now is a publicly traded company, is a behemoth. Are we going to see a King now, or is that just too hard?
I don't think it's too hard. I think it's very competitive, but we see a lot of brands very intelligently measuring on, kind of new methodologies. So top advertisers are looking at incrementality across multiple channels. So, and I think it's a big question for these LLMs is it diverting traffic from I was already going to get that's now coming through chatbots? And am I giving it, undue weight when it might not be additive or incremental to my business? These are like really difficult questions to answer across a broad set of marketing channels, but strong businesses are leaning into that kind of testing. They're combining that with attribution. They're recognizing that granular attribution doesn't just give me a sense of what conversion is associated with what media touch point, but they're recognizing that that's feeding optimization signal. That attribution data is post back to the walled gardens and the media networks for optimization. So they're getting better performance, and they're also triangulating that with internal modeling that they're doing that's very, very specific to their business. And I think it's allowing businesses to make, of all sizes and all categories, to make much sharper sort of allocation decisions on marketing dollars. And they're out competing businesses that might have bigger brands or bigger presence. So I don't think you just call it a day and say the largest players are going to win this one. I think, brands that recognize that consumers are on every surface, so they're sort of omni-channel by nature. Brands that recognize that marketing is very, very quickly evolving. It's collapsing from reporting to optimization and feeding sort of agentic platforms. And those that are looking at that signal and capturing it in real time are becoming very, very formidable competitors of major brands. So I think the landscape is more open than you might think.
And in terms of, I guess, for AppsFlyer, we've seen over the last few weeks, you've sort of seen like this shift. I feel like there's been measurement companies that are now getting much more into like the media optimization game. And then, smartly acquired incremental, like it is all kind of collapsing to some extent. Is that something that you think is a trend that continues? Like part of me feels like we've maybe seen this movie before where like these companies try to be like the everything answer, but then maybe it's good to have independence on the measurement side. I don't know, like, what's kind of the AppsFlyer point of view?
Well, I think measurement needs to always stay unbiased and independent to gain the trust and credibility of the market. I think there's a natural inclination from a business standpoint, to acquire assets that either attack more of the customer journey or more of the marketing stack, right? There's a constant thought of like, how do we acquire or build more capabilities to capture more value from that marketer? I think that will always be there. I think there's a way to do it where you're not polluting or diluting the independence and unbiased nature of measurement. So I think measurement sits at the foundation here. If you can trust measurement, if you get accurate measurement, you can weed out the fraud, you can combine that with kind of cost and the spend to calculate an accurate ROI and LTV. That's got to be the foundation. That's got to be the guiding light of how you're allocating and measuring your marketing. Once you have that, I think that can feed a lot of other aspects of the customer journey, or even the sort of the marketing, what we consider a growth loop. So if measurement's at the foundation of what you're doing and you trust it and you know how to allocate capital, you can then take that signal for optimization. And I think that's a very clear collapse that we're seeing, is that advertisers and networks are looking at measurement as a very unique signal to drive optimization. So that's collapsing. And I'd say the acceleration that AI and agentic workflows and autonomous workflows are bringing inside of marketing departments. So now you're seeing marketing operations be automated, whether they're human in the loop or it's fully automated, and whether it's by vertical or segment, you're seeing kind of more innovation there. But it's clearly moving to a place where measurement is moving beyond reporting into optimization, and now it's feeding autonomous performance marketing. So I think that's the collapse we see. And from an AppsFlyer standpoint, I think we're well positioned here because we have strong trust and market share in measurement. We have a very expansive roadmap to do that across all channels, not just mobile, stitching the customer journey together across all these media touch points, and having that feed and engine that is really, you see agentic commerce and agentic marketing sort of at the top of. So this is my point of view on that.
And let's talk about that. The agentic marketing and like automating some of those workflows. We know, I mean, there is a separation of companies that are maybe AI forward and much more adaptive to kind of using AI and being an early adopter, and those that are much more cautious and like, whoa, let's wait to see how this plays out. Are you seeing this? Like, are you seeing it in the data? The separation of those companies that start to adopt it and build out autonomous marketing workflows really accelerate the pace of their performance versus the others? Like, what is? You have an interesting cross-section and snapshot of it.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, there's a huge spectrum there. We'll talk to small, mid-sized gaming companies that have literally transformed every aspect of their business to be AI first. And they're super agile, and they're creating games and product. They're creating content and marketing. It's all interconnected. It's all run autonomously. They're making decisions based off of analysis that they get through an MCP server, and they're off and running. And then we have very sophisticated, very large spending marketers where the conversation is all around compliance and governance. And how do I not make mistakes? And how do I not cause a catastrophic failure at a brand level or a customer experience level? And we've seen, we've seen this, not necessarily in marketing, but we've seen major brands sort of make these mistakes, and it's kind of spooked an industry. And I think there's a dividing line between public and private companies. I think there's a dividing line between sort of enterprise and maybe more nimble SMB and mid-market. I think there's a dividing line between regulated businesses and sort of private, unregulated kind of companies. And, some of it you'd expect to see, but there's a very dramatic sort of, fracture in who's really leaning in and using AI in production level marketing and product, and who is being extremely careful and deploying it in anomaly detection, marketing operations, kind of break fix, writing content for an agency that ultimately will be human reviewed. So it's sort of like innovation, but it's not, we've hit the go button and it's automating at scale, the way others are. So we see a very, very dramatic range on this topic.
For the ones that have hit the go button, just as like someone who likes tech and who's been in this business for a long time, is it pretty amazing to see what these companies have stood up in terms of just the ability to move fast and ship?
I get very inspired in those conversations. It's almost like they have converted their entire business. Some of them are generating revenue at such record pace. They see themselves as almost, yesterday I was making games and I was making a handful of titles and marketing those games. Now I'm making dozens of games. The content and the creative generation and rotation is at an enormous pace. And the revenue generation is now a core asset of the business, and how they deploy that capital and how are they thinking about financial engineering. And, yesterday they were a game company, and today it's a different business, and they're running internal operations and managing agents upon agents in, you read about these things, but you see it up close, and it's very inspiring, but you also understand that they're able to run that in their environment. The risk and reward profile is different. The product's different. The customer expectations are different, but it's incredible. It's incredible how it's transforming how these CEOs even see their businesses and their teams in the last 6 months to a year.
Do you envision, I don't know if you can answer this, but like when you're saying that, it's like, it'd be really interesting, like if you could even like build your games and stuff in AppsFlyer, or like, could you imagine you guys moving further up on like the creation side of the equation? Or do you think for you guys, it's really more around like the marketing once it's been built side of it?
It's hard to know it's hard to know, multi years out how things look. What I can tell you is we try to ask ourselves all the time, we could build a lot of things, right? We think that we have a good sense of what our customers want. They tell us. We're deeply integrated into their stacks, right? So we see a lot of their data. We integrate very well with other tools in the tech stack, and we're on their side, right? So we look at ourselves as the extension of the advertiser, especially in the relationship between publishers and networks. So, and we have wide distribution. I think we're the third most deployed SDK behind Meta and Google. So just imagine the distribution we have, the access we have, the integration, the depth of integration that we have. And then our customers are telling us, could you build this? Could you acquire this? And this is a common question. So it's hard to understand like where we go with that multi-years out. What I can tell you though is we try to ask ourselves so we don't get distracted and we don't build things that we can't be the best at. What are we uniquely positioned to do? And a lot of that comes from informing what is measurement telling us and how do we feed signals? So today, we have, as an example, a very strong creative optimization and creative analysis engine. We can look at lots of different ad creatives across all the networks and help reduce the testing time so that you understand of a video creative ad, what is the right opening sequence? What's the right middle? What's the right ending? What's the right card? What's the right promotion? What's the right combination of visual assets that's going to drive an outcome? Now, we also know that there are a lot of businesses solely focused on ad creation. We don't want to be in that game today. So we're sending that feedback to all the tools that already do that. We think that's strong value, and we don't have to distract ourselves with a part of the marketing operation process that we're not, uniquely positioned to win in. And so we're trying to be very sort of disciplined about where we're playing and where we're not. But again, I'm bullish. You guys have measurement backgrounds. We've known each other for a long time. I'm really bullish on measurement as a category. I think the more platforms, the more fragmentation, the more complexity there is from a user journey, the more important measurement becomes. And the collapsing we've been talking about towards optimization and feeding an agentic layer on top, I think you're going to see more and more measurement housing these different capabilities for the future. So I wouldn't rule anything out.
Yeah, and I'll say two things from my current experience is working on like the Comcast side. It's one is AppsFlyer it's amazing how like when we recently just launched support for app install across TV. The first question we got talking to advertisers was like, if you're not supporting AppsFlyer, we're not in. It was just like, it was amazing how like AppsFlyer became, it's just like, can you accept credit card? Can I score via AppsFlyer? It was like that kind of question, which is just pretty amazing to see. And then I think sort of secondarily, you do look at the fact that you guys are kind of integrated everywhere. You really could see a world over time, I think, where like, regardless if you guys do it yourselves, it's just so important. And like the creative can become really liquid and like autonomous. Like I'm so excited to see that. And then as you're talking to, the other thing I just kept thinking is this shift towards incrementality, which is sort of being led by the walled gardens, ironically. Like in some ways it's sort of, it's kind of like Meta being such a proponent of it is sort of counter to their best interests in some ways. It could be. It's like a bet they're making, I guess you could argue.
Why do you say that? Why would it be counter?
I mean, when the post-click world, they were getting all the credit, right? They're just like, they had the best hand, right? Like if you looked at TV or even like Snapchat, we were always being under-attributed. But like incrementality actually puts us at a place where we're being, like TV is a good example. I think we've been under-attributed massively over the years. Now we're pushing towards it. We weren't a big enough of your media plan to force you to change how you measure. But now that everyone's being pushed towards incrementality, it actually just is helping TV, right? Like It's like Meta is doing our job for us in some ways, which is great, right? But I guess like by that same token, I think it's also just great timing for you guys, right? Like the more they push it, the more clear it becomes you can't trust anyone to grade their own homework, and you need to have this layer. So, but yeah, do you agree that that is somewhat of a risk for them, or you think just they have to because it's just aligned to advertisers?
I think they're probably seeing signal from a couple of different places to arrive at why they're pushing incrementality. Number one is I genuinely believe that as they innovate where they are and try to meet consumers on different services and different types of media, they're recognizing that sort of traditional attribution is going to undervalue a lot of current and future sort of media placements. So getting ahead of that and being innovative and thoughtful about bringing measurement and new measurement methodologies to the marketplace is in their interest. So they can stay ahead. And I don't think they'd be pushing this if they didn't have a lot of conviction in their own data and data science that it's going to actually improve their performance and ultimately revenue, right? So I'm sure I think it's good for the marketer, and I'm sure there's a lot of self-interest for the publishers themselves. You also see more broad sort of adoption of incrementality as a legitimate and an acceptable measurement methodology paired with attribution and modeling. It's becoming known amongst advertisers. There's companies focused on this that are doing very well and driving outcomes. And I believe like we see a lot of pickup in our own incrementality products. And once people work them into their operations, they don't want to live without them. It becomes a really, really important kind of always on testing environment that reinforces learning. I see finance departments, CFOs more accepting of this. A lot of times, nobody talks about this, but a lot of times marketing innovation dies when the CMO has to go and present to the CFO. CFOs want to see consistency quarter over quarter, year over year. They don't want to see tests and new marketing vocabulary and things that like actually can't back out into enterprise value and unit economics, things that have been tested and true. And you see more and more CFOs recognizing that incrementality and that kind of modeling, that kind of like experimentation is critical. So I think there's an acceptance in the market that the walled gardens are also aware of. They're talking to very senior level agencies and CMOs themselves. And I think, you ask about AppsFlyer and our positioning here. And I think we have quietly, we've stayed humble, but we've quietly, seen that as strong as the walled gardens are understanding what's happening in their world across devices, advertisers will look at AppsFlyer and say, this is the truth I want to see. And walled garden, we would like you to optimize your campaigns based on that data. And they're all working with us in some capacity to sort of blend their first party with what customers see from AppsFlyer. Because at the end of the day, if you are optimizing on data signal that the advertiser isn't use it to do budget allocation, there's going to be a gap. And so I think this is where sort of we enter the conversation.
And okay, as we start to wrap the conversation, I think we could go on for another half hour on this based on everything you just said. But you guys have seen so much over the last, decade and a half, almost 2 decades, from data collection, just kind of how apps grow, from freemium to paid to subscription, ad supported, all of the variations of this. What are you kind of most bullish on from a data perspective that you guys have and are working with your customers on to activate this across all these channels and to become a point of leverage for the businesses you work with? And you said it, this is something that is blending into the finance department. A CMO is deploying capital to gain leverage and grow the business. That is a finance, that's a finance role if I've ever heard one. So how are you guys kind of playing your role in that?
I think there's a few ways. Number one is finance likes to see how AppsFlyer is looking at marketing. It holds marketing accountable. So they learn to trust that. They learn to send board slides that have sort of been kind of verified by AppsFlyer as an independent third-party trusted source. And, the more we can help marketing articulate the value to finance, in our way. And a lot of conversations I have with CMOs, this is the conversation: is how do we help them bring a credible conversation to finance and ultimately get more dollars to grow. This is one. I think connecting from a data perspective, you ask, what I'm excited about, what I'm bullish about. For a long time, mobile and apps have been very siloed. It's been very siloed from the broader ad tech industry that's very web-based and has lots of DSPs and SSPs. And I go to these all the conferences, and, mobile is, maybe there's a mobile session, but it's not embedded in all the conversations the way I feel it should be when you take a consumer point of view and you realize how much time consumers are in these apps. Mm-hmm. It seems like a smaller kind of siloed thing at a lot of conferences. I just came back last week from MAU, Mobile Apps Unlocked, and it's all mobile, but it's a unique conference. Most industry conferences are not. And I think you're seeing a collapse of that. I think you're seeing a lot of things that the mobile industry has contended with over the years. We dealt with it first. We dealt with privacy restrictions in a very aggressive manner. We dealt with identifiers being deprecated with iOS 14 in a very aggressive manner. We've dealt with a lot of fragmentation. We've dealt with optimization, the walled gardens using that signal in real time as optimizations, and measurement becoming a signal for that. That's the mobile industry inherently understands the value of that. I think you're going to see that permeate across other channels and into the broader system. And the teams that have understood performance mobile, I think are going to be in a very good position to lead marketing and to drive more growth for the business. Another thing I'm excited about is inside of our customer accounts, mobile is getting connected to enterprise data lakes in a bigger way. For a long time, AppsFlyer was understood by the mobile performance team, and they looked at our reports and they made their changes. And the rest of the business was operating on other tools, using other data sources, and things weren't as connected as they could have been. We see that changing as well. We see customers using their own ID to connect mobile data with enterprise data in their data lakes and data warehouses. Mobile is informing larger growth strategies. Enterprise data, predictive lifetime value across all channels is informing mobile buys. And a lot of our customers are using our ETL and infrastructure and data locker and all of our capabilities to actually connect what AppsFlyer data shows them to a larger internal view of a customer. And when that becomes more unified, you're going to see companies leveraging apps and leveraging mobile in a more strategic way. So I think you can take a look at these different angles, and they're all converging. And I think that's where we're seeing an acceleration of our business and our customers who are kind of mobile savvy and have come up through mobile. Those individuals are in leadership positions because they understand where the data meets the customer experience. And there's one other thing I'll say, and I know I'm going on, but you guys can clip this, is when AI has removed product as the bottleneck, we see marketing and growth teams far more involved early on around product strategy. What geographies are we launching in? What is the customer experience? And how is marketing data, how is user acquisition and retention going to impact what we build? Because not too long ago, product built what product felt like building, and they'd effectively hand it to marketing. And marketing's job was to go get users and go get users that stuck around. And it was very sequential. And I think sophisticated companies and teams are collapsing marketing and product, and they're working very, very closely together. And when you can build very, very quickly, now it's a question of who are we building for? Where are they? What segments? What are they? What buying propensities do they have? And that's informing product development. So I think you can look at that lens as well.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, I had a conversation with a friend a couple weeks ago, kind of along these lines where it's like and this is self-serving probably for all of us, but it's like the people who kind of grew up in apps and the walled gardens are now starting to like permeate the rest of the internet in some ways, like from a business and marketing standpoint, where like for so long, you kind of had like this, the DSP, SSP, open web, East Coast side was like kind of driving the conferences and driving a lot of the strategy. And I feel like now what you're seeing is like the two are converging, right? And I find like every day I have these conversations with some people on that side, and they have tons of obviously great learnings for us, but like we all kind of speak a different language in some ways. And it's just so interesting to see it converge. Similarly, I think you make the point about like the product and marketing side, like the marketing team that we work with now, they're almost all like former operators, or they were real growth people. They're not like marketers. And it's fascinating to see, but makes me very bullish about where AppsFlyer sits in all of this. So,
well, it makes me bullish about what you guys.
Yeah.
I think TV is the perfect environment for what you're saying here, right? Like you tell me, but when I poll anecdotally customers and CTV providers, it's still like single digits of all their buys are performance buys. Like it's still crazy. Like massively under indexed for the promise. And the people who are going to figure that out, I think, are going to have a lot of mobile backgrounds. They're going to understand that TV could be bought, it could be measured, and it could be run like they've been running mobile over the years. And when that really catches, I think you're going to see a widespread shift in who's buying TV, how they think about it, how it's connected to everything else. And, the legacy world can get very, very quickly disrupted. And I think that where you guys are sitting and like building self-service ad tools and thinking about performance and leveraging all this data, I think you guys are going to be very, very well positioned for that shift. You're in a better place to see it than I am, but I think there's no greater, medium or media source than what you guys are operating in to see that shift.
But clip that.
Bias, but totally agree.
And run that as Matt. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that's sort of where this shift towards incrementality makes me so excited, because like TV isn't broken. It's just way too hard to buy and has been too hard to measure. It's like TV itself, biggest screen house, surrounded by great content. It's an unskippable ad. Like, it's like if I say this lovingly to my friends still at Snapchat, but like we were able to show Snap can drive ROI, and people don't watch those ads for very long. And that customer base does not have a ton of buying power. TV is like the inverse of that. And so like, I think we can make TV work. So I'm excited about it and appreciate you guys' partnership. It's exciting, and we pumped we got that out last week at Mao. So before we wrap up, where can people follow you if they want to talk all this stuff? What's the best way to get in touch?
LinkedIn. I'm trying to find time to stay active there, but I'm writing a lot of things. I'm talking to a lot of different folks, so pretty easy to get a hold of. But LinkedIn is the best place. Brian.Quinn@AppsFlyer is a direct email. But love to engage on this topic. I have a lot of passion for it. I think we're at a super exciting time. It's a very exciting time to be alive. It's exciting time to be kind of leading companies and trying to build and navigate all this stuff. And I think it's very like exciting and a little bit disoriented that nobody really knows where this is going. So everyone has like a good opinion, but nobody has the answer. And it's kind of up to us to sort of navigate it together. That gives me a lot of energy.
Likewise. And that's what we talk about every week. So couldn't have said it better. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll have to have you back as a 3-timer.
That'd be great. Love hanging out.
We'll get you like a custom sport coat.
That's right. The ADSN jacket.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
It's ADSN on the beat, where the data meets the street. James and Daniel in your feed, breaking down the code you need. Tech talk, ad game, and a little AI. Every week we got the chat on ADSN.